And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman, and I am excited to have with me today my friend Chaya Raichik from Libs of TikTok. I'm sure you've heard of her. She's all over the news this week and pretty often these days. Her account started, which we'll get into a little bit, just during COVID as a way to respond to the craziness of COVID and everything that's been going around. It was an anonymous account. Now they have over 5 million followers on the different platforms. She was doxxed, meaning her identity was released just a few years ago, which has really changed things for her. I think maybe at first in a negative way, but from my perspective, now there's a face behind all these tweets and these accounts that are really making a big difference in public discourse. And I'm just excited to have her on to talk about what she's doing and her viewpoint on some of the big news stories of the day. So Chaya, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, Gabe. It's great to be here with you.
So Chaya, let's just start a little bit from the beginning. Just tell us a little bit about how this Libs of TikTok thing started, why you started it, what you were trying to accomplish.
So during COVID, I kind of lost my job and I was trapped at home in California, which probably had the worst COVID lockdowns from anywhere else. And that's really when I started paying attention because I had never followed news before. I was not really so into politics. I had no background in journalism or in media or anything. And I'm locked in my house. So I started paying attention to what was going on. And of course, the election was then. And then after COVID, when things started opening back up, I went back to work and I spent a lot of time on Twitter. And I just started seeing these TikToks would go viral and I thought they were funny. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start sharing these TikToks. And it was mainly COVID related videos. It was like, worshiping Dr. Fauci and kicking toddlers off of planes for not wearing masks, shaming people for not getting the vaccine Disney songs, all that stuff. And I just thought it was really funny and entertaining. So I started sharing them. And then, of course, once I was on TikTok, I came across the whole other side of TikTok, which was all of the groomers, the teachers boasting about confusing kids about their identities, the doctors and mental health counselors telling kids that they can chop off their body parts, the anti-white racism, the anti-American sentiments, and all this stuff was very shocking to me. And I just felt like people didn't know how bad this was and that this was happening to this extent. So I just started sharing those videos and the account exploded.
And why was it anonymous on purpose at first? I mean, was the goal was just to sort of share this stuff and keep yourself out of it? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it started anonymous. I didn't really think too deeply into it. Very quickly after, probably about a month in, I saw how deranged the left is and insane they are. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep this anonymous. They don't need to know who I am. And so I stayed anonymous for about a year.
Yeah. And then tell us what happened. You were doxxed by the Washington Post, right?
Yeah, so Taylor Lorines from the Washington Post showed up to my house, a couple of my relatives' homes, my neighbors, and she was searching for me. And she basically released my name and information about me. And then that was about 2 years ago. And I was not anonymous anymore.
Yeah, and how did that change things for you? I mean, obviously, it's well documented. You started getting lots of death threats and all the craziness that happens when you speak out against things that people don't like. But has it been all negative for you?
So, I mean, I think there's some positives. I think I obviously would have preferred to be anonymous, but I didn't really have a choice. So I think that at this point, it's just up to me how I'm going to react to what happened to me. And I think I've reacted really well. I've learned to embrace it. Being public, I'm able, I think, to do a lot more for the cause to stop the sexualization of children, to expose the radical left. So, I'm doing what I can. And I think it's maybe one of the best cases of the Streisand effect that I've ever seen.
Yeah, totally. Listen, when what's incredible, if you spend any time, if anyone would spend time just scrolling through your posts themselves without reading about you or about your accounts, because the way you're described and your accounts are described is very, very different than what's actually there. What jumps out at me when you look at it as a whole, and I've followed you for a long time, but even preparing for this, just kind of scrolling through, first of all, you put out a lot of content, but scrolling through it, what's incredible is the vast majority, if not all of it, isn't even your content. You're you're shining a light on things that you find crazy that are happening out there in the world that people are exposing themselves. I think maybe you'll make a little comment about it, but you're really just showing them in their own words, saying different things, and we'll get into those things. And it seems to me, like when I look at it, that in particular is what drives people crazy, because it's not just, if I tweet something, says, "Yeah, who's this guy who's saying something?" Sometimes it'll get people upset, sometimes it won't. But you're showing what they're saying with a little commentary, and that really is what drives them nuts.
Yeah, that's why they hate me so much, because they want to live in their little bubble where everybody agrees with them and everybody celebrates them. And if I take their own content and I share it to people who might not see things the way they do, they lose their minds, because at the end of the day, I mean, their views don't hold up to scrutiny. And if all I'm doing is just shining a light on their views, then it's indefensible.
What's incredible to me, and I work in the political world and the government world, is every time things come up on the craziness on the left when it comes to do when it has to do especially with gender, with immigration, with these different hot button issues, and you bring up an incident of books that are being read to school children, young school children around the country, lesson plans, so what teachers are saying to their kids around classrooms all over the country, laws that are being passed, even laws that are being passed. You bring it up, and everybody it has a severe case, I think, of denialism. Right? People say, it doesn't really happen. They don't even defend the issue that's being brought up. They just say it doesn't happen, like on the sex change for kids. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And then what your account does, it's almost like it jumped out at me where you say you didn't study journalism, but in a way you're really like an investigative journalist, because you go out, you find the actual stories, and you show it in their own words. Right? What do you attribute this denialism to? That where the left just denies that it even happens in the mainstream, at least.
Well, first of all, I think the left are a bunch of liars, untrustworthy hypocrites. So there's that. But I think, like what I said before, at the end of the day, their views don't hold up to scrutiny, and I think they know that. And they tried this with so many things. I mean, they tried it with critical race theory. They said critical race theory is not being taught in K to 12 schools, and then that we were able to shoot down, and now they admit that it is. The same with gender ideology. It's not being taught, and we have all these examples that it is. Sex change surgeries on minors. Of course, we all know it's happening. So all these things, they have this kind of pattern where the left says it's not happening, and then we expose that it is, and they admit that it is happening. But then they actually start promoting it. They're like, okay, it is happening, but it's good, and we should actually promote this. And we've seen this pattern so many times, and I think that they end up just telling on themselves when they say that this stuff is actually good after denying that it's happening.
Yeah, it's like an extra layer in our society now. First, you have to figure out what's actually happening, right? Because of so many lies that are thrown up, so many smoke screens, before you can actually attack the things that are happening. So they're just throwing up smoke screens, trying to buy time to continue to build, to push forward with their ideologies and their plans that they're trying to implement, until accounts like yours and different alternative media usually is able to shine a light on it, and then things start either to change or not, or they double down. Let's talk a little bit about the biggest news stories this week, and I know you commented a lot of that on this, and it has to do with migrant crime. We've done a few episodes on the immigration crisis, speaking to members of Congress. Is over about 300,000 encounters at the border every single month, and just so people know, those are encounters when actually the border patrol actually talks to the migrants that are coming across the border, either at the point of entry or not talking about the people who actually get through and don't speak to anyone. So the numbers are staggering, and the right, which is crazy. It shouldn't be a right or left thing. We're just talking about border security, but have been screaming, saying, "Hey, this is bad for a million reasons. The first of which is we don't know who's coming across our country, and you're going to let in criminals included in these people, right? Like let's not get caught up in the Trump thing on the border. There's obviously going to be criminals as part of this. You see who's crossing; they're coming from all over the world, not just from Mexico or from Central America. We know bad things are going to happen. And if you just take this week, I just wanted to be specific. So this past week, we have the 12-year-old girl from Houston, Jocelyn Nungaray, who was brutally raped and murdered by two illegals. One of them came into the country just a few weeks ago illegally. In New York City, we had a 13-year-old who was tied up and raped in a park in broad daylight by an Ecuadorian illegal immigrant. Then we had Rachel Moran, a mother of 5 in Maryland, who was murdered while on a trail run by an illegal immigrant. That's just this week, and I'm sure there's more stories, right? That's just me looking online. These are stories that people have been talking about, and you've been very, very vocal about it. Why has it been so important for you to shine a light on these stories and who these people are that are committing these crimes?
I mean, I think it's really sad that border security has become a left versus right issue, because it really shouldn't be. We're talking about the safety of our country, and it feels almost like it's just open season on young American women right now because Biden left the border wide open, and we have all these criminals coming across the border and wreaking havoc and ruining and destroying lives. Um, and they like you said, we have 300,000 a month, and the Democrats they try to change our language, right? They're like, oh, these are asylum seekers, but no, these aren't asylum seekers. These are criminals. They're rapists. They're murderers. They're robbers. They're scam artists, and it's basically open season on Americans. And it's very scary. There are Americans now have to be worried walking down the street because in someone who came into our country illegally might rape them.
Yeah, and look, the issues get conflated so quickly and so easily, and I think that's intentional, right? So, for example, on immigration, like my family's, I'm a first generation American. My parents came from Argentina in the '70s, escaping actually a military coup that was there for 13 years that most people don't even know about. Both came here. My dad was had just finished medical school, came here and did his residency. My mom came. Her father was here, so he was able to bring her over. Right? There's legal immigration, and then there's illegal immigration that gets conflated in the first instance. And in the second instance, people will say, when you're talking about crime in response to what you're saying, we'll say, well, there's crime from all types of people. Most crime is from legal people who are here legally and residents. Sure, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we have literally millions. It's the estimates are over 10 million illegal immigrants who have come in the country over since Biden has taken office, and we know based on the numbers who's coming across, and that we're getting a significant number of criminals and the illegal activity that they are engaging in, and it's really we're breeding the grounds for it. Because if you look at a city like New York City, where they have over 100,000 migrants that are living in their cities in hotels, they can't really work because they don't really have papers to work. They're sort of in this in-between phase. What's going to happen? We're setting up a perfect situation for these type of crimes to happen all over the country, and we're seeing it. But my question to you after that whole thing is, why do you think even the mainstream press on the right, they're not really focusing on this, right? They either hyper focus on an issue, or they ignore it entirely. They laugh about it, which you posted about a little bit this week as well. But why is it that they're ignoring this issue, I think, entirely?
I don't know. I do see a lot more coverage recently of all of these illegal crimes. I think that one of the main issues probably that should be talked about more is how they're going to change our country. And the left will say something like the Great Replacement is a right wing conspiracy theory. But then this week there was a video of a Biden official who was caught on undercover on camera, basically admitting that that's exactly what they're doing. So that I think it's a huge issue. They're bringing in millions of these people, and they're at the same time they're trying to take away voter ID, and they're trying to give these people amnesty. And I think that that's the real goal is to change the entire nature of our country. Most of these people coming over are going to register as Democrats, and that's what this is all about. It's to win elections.
Yeah, look, I have a lot of back and forth on exactly that topic with some friends on the Democrat side on whether that's the goal or not. We know that's the ultimate outcome, whether it's now or in a generation, right? That's the ultimate outcome of what's happening. But it's at what expense, right? That's the real dangerous part, right? Is it at the expense of really creating a country? Because to have a country, you have to have borders. You have to have every country in the world has borders and has immigration policies. And Canada, which everybody turns to on the left as this like beacon of socialism, right? Try to immigrate to Canada. Right? They have much stricter immigration policies than we do in the United States. But do you think you're shedding a light on this? How do you see it affecting or impacting the discussion, the discourse around these topics?
I mean, I think that the last couple of months it's really heated up because it's become much more obvious what the Democrats are doing. These innocent Americans who are being raped and murdered. I mean, it's just stacking up. It's not just one case or two cases. There's dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds. And it's basically impossible to ignore. So I think the Democrats were kind of just like hoping that the problem would somehow go away or we would ignore it. But you can't ignore it when you have 10 million illegals who came here in the past couple of years. You have 300,000 a month coming in. I mean, this is like front and center, and Trump has made this basically a central focus of his campaign because he knows that Americans don't want this. Americans don't stand for this. And he wants to protect Americans and protect our country. So I think that, I mean, I hope that Trump keeps his campaign promise and deports millions of these illegals because I think the future of our country depends on it.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. That's a difficult task, but it pulls, having a strong border policy pulls very well across the board, which is almost the most baffling part from just a political science perspective of why Democrats would still push on this, because it doesn't even pull well with Hispanics, right? I mean, people don't, no one's for having these open borders other than the people in office, right? So I mean, it's really this tremendous problem for our country, and we're going to pay for it for a long time. Let's take a minute away from the show to talk about personal responsibility. One thing we learned during the COVID pandemic is that it is our responsibility to be prepared with medications that our family may need if someone gets sick. We know there's other pandemics that are being talked about a lot, whether it's the bird flu, but it's not just pandemics. It's just being ready to take care of our families and not having to rely on that moment, that flash when something happens, to rush to a doctor, to go out and get the medication you need, hope they have it at the pharmacy. There's a way to be prepared, and it's our responsibility to do so. Fortunately, you can get medications like Tamiflu easily without having to book an office appointment with your old physician. The wellness company developed a contagion emergency kit. It's a prescription-only stockpile of life-saving medications like Tamiflu, ivermectin, Z-Pak. There's tons of great medications in their packs. You can check it out online at twc.health/Gabe, twc.health/Gabe. You can order it online. They're one-of-a-kind prescription contagion kit. Again, from the wellness company. Every house should have one of these. Check it out. Use code GABE, GABE, for our listeners. It saves you 10% and gets you free shipping at checkout. Thanks so much. Let's go back for a long time. But look, your account has focused a lot, and you focus a lot, and you call it the sexualization of children, sort of gender ideology in the classroom. So before we get into what happened this week in California with the new law that was passed there, what have you seen? What trends have you seen around the country regarding this issue?
So we're seeing in a lot of school districts, they're implementing, it's not just, a one-off radical teacher. They're actually implementing policies in school districts across the country to purposely hide information from parents about a child who is confused about their identity. So, a child who decides to change their name or pronouns or says they're trans or non-binary, the schools will hide that from parents, and they're putting that into their guidelines and their policies, and that's what's really scary, because once it's embedded so deeply like that into the school systems, it's going to be really difficult to undo. And they're also forcing teachers and other staff members who might not agree with that to go along with it, because that's their policy across the board. And of course, from there, who knows what's going to happen? You're going to have a teacher who doesn't follow that policy, and then they're going to face consequences for that. So I think it's just a total disaster. And then in California this week, they passed they passed or are trying to pass. I think it passed one chamber, but basically a ban on schools that they can't make a policy that would allow them to inform parents if their child is trans. So they're going so far, not just in school districts, but in the legislature as well, to really take parents out of the picture and take your kids and confuse them and sexualize them.
Yeah. So just on that last topic, I think that's really the heart of the issue, which isn't about kids that are confused. And we'll get to that in a second about what sort of ideologies you see being pushed by teachers around the country and indoctrination type things around the country. They're not just teaching math and science. So what is it that you're seeing these teachers pushing? But the real bottom line on all of it is, who controls your kids? And is it you as a parent, or is it the state? And in places like California, they're saying it's the state's responsibility. It's not yours. And I think that's just tremendous. And that's a huge, huge, huge mistake. And it's very dangerous for our society, because what's more precious than our own kids? And if we're handing over our kids to the state, I think that's called communism, right? I mean, that's not the kind of thing we want in our country. But what are you seeing as far as indoctrination in classrooms around the country?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of this. I've had multiple videos where teachers say that they have their students pledge allegiance to the Progress Pride flag instead of the American flag. I've had multiple videos of teachers talking about how they came out to their students as transgender, non-binary. They help their students come out. You know, their elementary school students are changing their pronouns and they're not telling the parents. I mean, this is this is like going on in almost every school, and on top of that, you have what's going on in the libraries. They're giving kids, elementary kids, like pornography in school libraries. They're teaching them about all kinds of really inappropriate things for that age level. And you know, that's something that I've been focusing on a lot to expose the pornography in schools, which is just another way of sexualizing kids.
Where do we get these videos? Where do you get these videos from? Is it the teachers themselves that are filming them, or are there kids that have phones that are filming what their teachers are doing? How are these videos get put out there?
It's mainly the teachers themselves. They just don't see anything wrong with it, and they're so proud of what they're doing, and they boast about it on TikTok. I just go to TikTok, I find their videos, and I share it with the rest of the world.
Wow. And do you see, there's a lot of similarity of that kind of indoctrination that's happening around the country in different places. Do you see this being coordinated, or is this sort of just a copycat thing that's happening as a result of social media?
I think that it's probably been coordinated a while ago. I think that the teachers now who are doing it have been brainwashed into it. I don't know if they believe or even really fully know what they're doing, but I think that there is people at the top who are coordinating this massive agenda. I think they've been doing it for decades. Conservatives haven't really been paying attention, and they've been able to infiltrate basically every single institution and get all of these little, you know, activists to do the work on their behalf. And that's where we have these teachers, school counselors, principals, school board members. And of course, it's not just schools. I mean, I think that they've been embedded in every institution, the government, Fortune 500 companies, corporations, everywhere. I mean, they've just been embedded everywhere. I think it's been an agenda that's been happening for decades.
If you put in your search bar in Twitter for in your account, you write California, I feel like you get the vast majority of your tweets are about and your posts are about what's happening in California. Outside of California, where else are you seeing a lot of this kind of crazy activity by teachers, a sort of activist activity by teachers to try to indoctrinate kids or sexualize them, as you're putting it?
So there's a lot of it in Massachusetts, which is the most liberal state in America. New York has a ton of it. And surprisingly, Texas has a ton of the stuff. I know Texas is trying to pass school choice, school vouchers, and I think they will pass it in the next legislature. I'm hopeful they do, because you know these, like I said, even in conservative towns, I mean they've infiltrated deep for years, and you know we're slowly starting to undo everything that they've done.
Yeah, here, I mean, if you look at school board races, for example, around the country, you used to have to fight to get someone to run for a school board because it's a pain, takes a lot of time, it barely pays, and you're just dealing with complaints from teachers and parents all day. Now it's like the hottest race in any county is the school board race. Here in Miami-Dade County, there's a few seats open this season, and I mean, everybody cares about who's running for the school board because of the amount of activism that we're seeing there. But what I've been telling people, it's not just the school board level because it's who the teachers are, right? And who's become teachers in the last few years, and you can't just replace the teachers one day to the next. So it's a real deep problem, which is why school choice is actually they don't call it vouchers anymore, but the funds that are coming out there, like the state of Florida, where you get $8,500 if you send your kids towards a private school, if send your kids to a private school. It's opening up the public schools, making it better student teacher ratios, so it helps the kids there, and it also lets you the money follow the student as opposed to just go to the school. So it's worked well here, and I agree. I actually think school choice is going to make its way across the partisan line as well. I think it's wildly popular for parents all over the country just to be able to send your kid wherever the hell you want and not have to go to the school. If you don't like your school and you can't afford going into a private school, this can really make a huge difference. Look, the last topic I wanted to talk about that you were in the news a lot about this week has to do with, it's a crazy topic if you don't really pay attention to it, which is I think why people try not to pay attention to it, but is sex change operations and puberty blockers for minors. We're not talking about adults who go in and want to do something, about minors. And many hospitals and such have been saying, well, we don't do that. We don't do that. And you've sort of, it seems like, have taken it upon yourself to just expose hospitals that are out there saying that they're doing it and then just shining a light on them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've exposed a lot of hospitals for doing sex change surgeries on minors. And every time I did, the left immediately went to the defense of the doctors and the hospitals. And of course, they have all their media outlets to help cover for them. And they would just basically say I'm lying. And I'm like, you guys have videos on your own website that I just pulled. So I don't know how you could deny it. And it's just crazy that they're more upset at me for informing the public of these operations that they're proudly doing than they are that kids are actually getting their body parts chopped off. And it's like I get insanely attacked for simply informing the public of what they are boasting about doing to kids.
Yeah, and you're not just saying it; you're showing what they're saying about it, right? Whether it's their videos in some hospitals, or it's their websites, where you're just reposting their own material, right?
Yeah. So, for example, Boston Children's Hospital, they had videos on their YouTube channel where they talked about all the kinds of operations that they would do on minors. And I shared some of those videos, and they, immediately wiped them. And the left just, they went for months. They were posting articles saying that I lied and that, everyone who was talking about this and exposed it was lying. AOC even mentioned me in a committee hearing, and she demanded from Twitter to why they didn't ban me for lying about Boston Children's Hospital. And it's just like, how is it lying if they themselves are saying this? Not just that, we had Children's National Hospital in DC. I called them, recorded it, and they admitted to me on the phone that they do hysterectomies on children under 16. And if you know anything about hysterectomies, I mean, like for a middle-aged woman to get one is really difficult. The doctors make it a really hard process, because, of course, people can change their mind. They can have regrets. And to do something that is permanent like that is a really big deal. And here these hospitals are admitting to doing these operations on minors simply because this young girl says that she thinks she's a boy. And it's just absolutely insane. And the way that the left and the media, I repeat myself, it's the same thing. The activists, the way that they cover for these doctors it's just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, and it's not. It's even worse than that because I was just reading about Ethan Heim, right? Is his name? The yeah, Ethan Heim, Eitan Heim from Texas Children's Hospital, a doctor. He was doing his surgery internship there, and he blew the whistle on surgeries that they're doing, gender assignment surgeries or reassignment surgeries for minors. And the DOJ went and knocked on his door, and they now charged him with a crime for revealing, I guess, HIPAA violations or something of that nature.
Yeah, they are. The DOJ is going after Aton. They're also going after two nurses from Texas Children's Hospital who also blew the whistle on the sex change operations. And I actually got to interview Aton recently, and he's really brave. But I think that they're gonna try to go after the people who are exposing it rather than go after these butchers who are mutilating kids. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, for me, and the reason why I thought it was important to talk about all of these things is because I think the biggest problem we have in our society, on top of these issues that are happening or but related to it, is that from the political perspective and the leadership perspective, many members of the Democratic Party have figured, okay, well, these guys are on our side, so they've actually adopted a lot of these or supported a lot of these policies, either tacitly or explicitly, and they're doing it really just to get their votes. And if you speak to any of them in private, no one really believes this is a good thing. They just think they have to do it politically, which is incredibly dangerous. And I think we have to really separate as a society these like core issues of like the bread and butter issues about what kind of DNA we want our society to have, what kind of culture we want to have, just basic values of protecting our children and letting them grow up pure and just letting them develop as we all did when we were growing up, right? As opposed to starting to implant these crazy ideologies to them in their minds. We should all be focusing on that together. It shouldn't be something that any political party is supporting in any way. Like one Democratic strategist told me recently, like drag story hour for kids is not something we should be hanging our hats on. But they are, right? I mean, we saw a drag queen with the vice president yesterday all over their Twitter. So she was so happy to welcome a drag queen to her house. And I mean, it's really something that's so harmful to our society. So I think, you get a lot of criticism, Chaya, and we can wrap on this. We get a lot of criticism on just shining a light, and even in this Boston Children's case, someone that made a bomb threat allegedly to the hospital. There's paperwork there where they're blaming you almost for shining a light on it, like because you told people, you're getting people upset about it. But from where I sit, sunshine's the best disinfectant, and I think that's what you're doing. I mean, how do you look at that charge where people think you're inciting just by showing what's going on out there?
I mean, I think again, it's a way just to silence people exposing them. They hate being exposed. They hate when a light is shown on them, and they try to go after the people doing that. But I also think that you can tell a lot about a person by their haters, by their enemies. And if the people who are pro butchering children hate me, then I think that's actually a huge compliment.
Yep, I love that, and lots of times on this podcast, especially if I talk about anything Jewish or Israel related, the comment section will be riddled with just pure anti-Semitism, just the worst of the worst. And I have the ability to delete those comments, and I don't, because I want people to see it. I want people to see that, and you could judge me by my enemies, just like you said. So, Chaya, thanks so much. Thanks for all the work you're doing. You've got a really strong backbone to really stand up to this. It's easier said than done. To all this stuff is said about what you're doing, but you believe in what you're doing, and you keep pushing and shining a light on this craziness. I hope there's a day that this craziness isn't there and your account is not needed. But for the time being, it really plays a big role. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabe.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Please make sure to follow, subscribe, and do all the great things you do to support podcasts. And we'll see you next time.
All right, awesome.